Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's lesson, English First Additional Language, Paper 2 Literature. My name is Karabo Day. This lesson is brought to you by Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saibono Discovery Center and broadcast by Pakama Research and Development. Grade 12, you can get in touch with us on our WhatsApp interactive number 064 748 8913. I'll repeat the number 064 748 8913. Our focus of the lesson today is My Children, My Africa, Act 1, Scene 1. I would like to know from you, what is a drama? Remember what we have done last week? A drama script consists of a dialogue, stage directions, setting, plot, conflict, climax, character. Just a reminder to you, when you study drama, you need to visualize the stage and the setting. Try to hear the tone of voice of each character. Try to imagine the character's emotions. In your head, form a mental picture of the actor's moments on the stage. A drama is a performance meant for the stage. But what we are doing as grade 12 learners or the learners of English, we take what is meant for the stage and study it on paper. So that's the reason I say you need to visualize the stage. You need to have eyes. Look at those people and see the setting there. What is the stage? That is where the drama is performed. The setting, the time, and the place. Put it in your head. When we speak of a school, in your visuals, in your visual eye, in your eyes, what do you see? You see desks, you see a chalkboard, you see a teacher, cupboard, and books. And as you read the characters on paper, just close your eyes, your ears, your heart from everything else outside you, and hear the voice of this person that you are reading, the tone of the character. And it will be varying tones, isn't it? Depending whether they are happy or they are angry. So the tone will vary. So we want you to have that, to feel it as you read. Again, imagine, use your imagination. Determine how they feel, their emotions when saying the words that you are reading. Remember, what you have done is you have blocked out all the sounds, what the world is happening in front of you or besides you. You are only concentrating on the words on picture. You now form a mental picture of the actors. You can imagine Mr. M, isn't it? With his tie, with his chalk, walking very sternly with a purpose. And then you have a mental picture of Tammy, an easygoing boy with school uniform, perhaps with the shirts not tucked in. And our Isabel, imagine her to be this cute little lady. And also check the moments that the actors have on stage. You form a mental picture. Our title or our agenda that we are going to focus on this afternoon is My Children, My Africa. Mr. M, in one of his monologues, he utters these words. And Fal Grade, who is the playwright also, wrote these words. Every African soul is either carrying a bundle or in it. What is wrong with this world that it wants to waste you like that? My children, my Africa. Titles are very important. They carry the gist or the message of what we're going to read on or what the book is all about. Every African soul, every person in the African continent who is African is either carrying a bundle. When you're carrying a bundle, you are carrying what? A load. Or you have what? Problems. If you carry the load, it means you have problems. It's either you are carrying the load or you are that load, you are that bundle of problems. You are either a victim themselves or you are carrying a victim. You are either a victim or you are carrying a victim. That is in My Children, My Africa, the title. Who wrote this play? It's written by Fal Grade, 1932. Sorry, I'm going to scratch out that one. He was born in 1932 in Middelburg, South Africa. He is best known for his political plays opposing the system of apartheid. Political plays. What are political plays? They are set in a political arena and they examine questions of humanity. What is happening in the human realm, in the political sphere, be it service delivery, be it education. So all these things or employment, they touch on politics. So Fal Grade was very political and he had opposing attitude and he wanted to talk more about the system of apartheid. It didn't go well with him that people were not treated the same as others. So the system of apartheid is a system of segregation and discrimination on the grounds of race. He was not discriminated against because he's white, isn't it? But that did not augur well with him to see other people being discriminated at. And as a result, it made him want to write plays or dramas that spoke about the plight of the African people. I'm sure everyone has seen this play, Tsotsi. It is one of his novels, and it was directed by Gavin Hood. It won the Oscar back in 2005. Arthur is internationally known for his penetrating, and he has a pessimistic analysis of South African society during the apartheid period. What is pessimistic? Pessimistic is to be hopeless. You believe that the worst will happen, that there is only hopelessness and things are bleak or are negative. Given the surroundings or what he saw happening to the black people, he felt very sad, and he never thought South Africa will become a country where we say today we have a rainbow nation. Everyone's rights are respected. He did not just write. He wrote over 30 plays, and he was an actor himself. He acted in some of the plays, and he was awarded a special Tony for lifetime achievement in the theater. Okay. The historical background of My Children, My Africa. When was it written? It was written way back in 1984. It touched on these important areas of South African life. It was written where in South Africa just before the state of emergency that happened in 1985, where South Africa was going through an education crisis between the years of 1984 and 1990. With this, My Children, My Africa was born. South African politics during those dark years, there was a tricameral parliament. Tricameral parliament meaning the three key people in South Africa were recognized. And who are they? A law was passed that there is going to be a House of Assembly which catered only for white people. So it was a parliament, a big parliament, but it had 3 houses. So we have one house as the House of Assembly, where the majority of the people in House of Assembly were white, and they had the voting power. Legal power was given to colored people, and they were given what we call a House of Representatives. Then lastly, the Indians were in charge of House number 3, which is the House of Delegates. So we have the Indians there. You see there's a line there that divides the 3 nationalities from the one on the bottom. And who are these people? These are the black people. They did not have the vote. So they did not have rights. So Fal Grade looked at this and felt very bad about the situation, and thus he wrote the book. During this year, 1985, a state of emergency was passed. Why a state of emergency? A state of emergency was in place because there was massive resistance among black South Africans. Remember, they were now worried they did not have a vote. So what did they do? They decided to have a massive resistance because there were policemen, oppressive police, and military action against them. So a state of emergency was declared that made people's movement be shortened, and you had a set of rules that one had to abide with. So you see that hand there? People protested. They raised their fists and said, power to the people. What were they fighting for? They wanted to be liberated. They wanted to be empowered. They wanted to be set free. They wanted the same things as other nationalities. During this era, there was an education crisis because, remember, people were rioting, there were mass protests, and the young people started fighting, saying liberation before education. We have COSAS that spearheaded the massive protests against what the black people were going through. There was a national education crisis committee that was formed, which prompted or fought for what we call the people's education. They wanted every child, whether black or white or colored, to have, or Indian, to have the same education. So there was a lot of fighting. And liberation before education was a bit problematic. Because now the parents were worried. Our children are not going to school. What are they going to do? Let's hear what Fal Grade thought. He said, after looking at the historical background of what was happening in South Africa, he got across a newspaper article that prompted him to read or to write the play, My Children, My Africa. He says, quite simply, my play is about a school teacher, not just a school teacher, but an elderly school teacher who has invested all of his dreams in terms of a better world, a better South Africa, in one of his pupils, who is a young man. My story is about the best way to react to the appalling events in South Africa, the South Africa of the time. He continues to say, I wrote the play under pressure of my own response to that debate. And what is that debate? Liberation before freedom. What is the correct way to respond to a situation like that? Should violence be met with violence? Or is there an alternative? At what time I was debating that issue with myself very passionately, that should education stop? I found myself believing, he says, that putting words on paper is a valid form of action. Word can get inside those armored cars. What is armored? Armored is vehicles that have what? Ammunition, weapons, tear gas, guns that can be used at the rioting children or the rioting people, black people. So he says, words can get inside those armored cars, and words can get inside the heads of the people inside those armored cars. Words can get in, and they can do what? Change the thinking in the heads of the people inside those armored cars. So that's the reason we have the book, My Children, My Africa. The play opens with an energetic debate organized by Mr. M. The inter-school debate between the matric learners of Kamdibu Girls High and Zolile High takes place in a classroom of Zolile High. Isabel and Tammy make their concluding statements. After the debate, Isabel and Tammy find time to talk. And despite their different backgrounds, they instantly become friends. Their friendship is born by what? Because they are human. No color mentioned here. They debated on equal footing. There was no color. And that's what Mr. M wanted to achieve. A society that is colorless. A society that looks at children as children. Remember what it said at the beginning. The soul of the African. My children, my Africa. We have conflict. What is the main problem in the story? It's a conflict between men versus men. Tammy and Mr. M do not see eye to eye. They have differing opinions with regard to riots. Mr. M is too authoritarian in his thinking and teaching. He believes children must act this way. Nothing should prevent learners to come to school. And he did not support student protest. He is also in denial of the reality of the political situation that is happening in front of him in South Africa. On the other hand, Tammy is convinced that the words are not enough. So what he needs to do is to join political activists. He is frustrated that Mr. M assumes what is best for him without asking him about his own ideas and his own goals. As a young person, he has ambition, isn't it? But it can't be that Mr. M all the time says, Tammy, you must sit down. Tammy, you must say this. Tammy, you must go west, or Tammy, you must go east. So they had differing opinions. When we come to the point where we deal with themes, we're going to speak about generational conflict. People of different generations believing in different issues. So we have our rising actions. Remember last week, we dealt on these steps of dealing with or reading literature. Our rising action here is Mr. M does not realize that there is a disagreement or conflict between Tammy and himself. Mr. M orders Tammy, mark the word, orders, Tammy to be in the English literature quiz team. On the other hand, what does Mr. M do? He politely requests Isabel. Can you see the different words there? He orders and he politely requests Isabel to join Tammy in the literary competition. Ultimately, as the story progresses, Tammy withdraws from the team after a few practice sessions. There is conflict evident here between Tammy and Mr. M. They do not agree on how the struggle for freedom should be waged. Tammy also nurtures an inner conflict, internal conflict, a conflict with himself. He wants to pledge loyalty to his comrades, and then on the other hand, he respects Mr. M. He wants to be seen as a good student to Mr. M. So that's the conflict that is at hand. When we reach the climax now, Mr. M is accused of being an informer. Why is he accused to be an informer? Because he went to the police and gave them the lists of the activists. Tammy comes to the school to warn Mr. M about their plan to burn down the school as well as to kill him. Mr. M refuses to run away or go into hiding. There are violent protests in the location, and ultimately Mr. M is killed. Sad, isn't it? And now the following action. Tammy has called for a meeting with Isabel, and they talk to each other for the last time. Remember, they have just found themselves in a new friendship. Now their icon or their idol is killed. Tammy sees it fit to call a meeting, a last meeting, where he tells Isabel that he is going away. He's going to join the struggle movement. Isabel confronts Tammy about Mr. M's terrible death. She wants to know, who killed Mr. M? Did you let your friends kill our teacher? They both confess their love for Mr. M. Tammy, indeed he did, isn't it? He tried to save Mr. M's life. But remember who we are dealing with here? Mr. M is a very obstinate person, set in his ways as an old person. In her efforts to find closure regarding the death of Mr. M, Isabel goes to Warpatsberg Pass to be connected to the spirit of Mr. M, to bid Mr. M farewell. And when she's there, she makes a promise to herself that she's going to be useful. And Mr. M will look from heaven and look at her and then he will be proud. He's going to make Mr. M very proud. She says, the future is still ours, Mr. M. This ours, what does that mean? Ours meaning you, Mr. M, you looked forward to seeing me progress and succeed in life, and I'm going to do that for you. We're going to read an extract, Act 1, Scene 1, found in our books. I hope you all have your books with you. Order, please. That's Mr. M. I never said anything of the kind. Yes, you did. You said that women were more. Yes, you did. I call you both to order. That's Mr. M. What I said was that women were more emotional than men. Correction, Tammy. That women were more intuitive than men. Miss Dyson and Mr. Mbikwana, will you both please? You're twisting my words and misquoting me. I'm not. I am simply asking you. Come to order. He grabs the school bell and rings it violently. It works silence. Mr. M continues. I think it is necessary for me to remind all of you exactly what a debate is supposed to be. He opens and reads from a little black dictionary that is at hand on the table. My dictionary defines it as follows: the orderly and regulated discussion of an issue with opposing viewpoints receiving equal time and consideration. Shouting down the opposition so that they cannot be heard does not comply with this definition. Enthusiasm for your cause is most commendable, but with personal discipline, it is as useless as having a donkey and a good cart, but no harness. We are now running out of time. No more interruptions from the floor, please. We will bring our proceedings to a close with a brief, I repeat, brief, 3 minutes at the most, summing up our arguments. Let's start with you, Mr. Tamim Bikwana of Zolile High. Will you please make your concluding statement? Tammy stands up. A wild roar of applause from the audience. He is secure and at ease. He is speaking to an audience of schoolmates. His concluding statement is outrageous, mark it, outrageous. And he knows it. But what does he do? And he enjoys it. Okay. Learners, let's proceed. Can you see on the screen? We have the two vibrant boy and girl in the classroom, and then we have Mr. Anela Mialaja there as the teacher at Zorile High School, and he is moderating the debate between his star student. Who's his star student? Tamim Bikwan. And Isabel Dyson. Who is she? She is a student from the affluent meaning rich, wealthy, white girls' school, Kamdibu High. Despite Tammy's passionate closing remarks and his popularity among his classmates, Isabel wins the debate. Interesting, isn't it? After the rest of the class leaves, Isabel and Tammy talk. And despite their different backgrounds, a good friendship is born. Different backgrounds. Tammy is poor and black. Isabel is rich and white. However, children are children. A good friendship is born. In My Children, My Africa, we are going to be looking at the following important symbols. 1. Brak water. Brak water. Where is Brak water? It is a place where Zolile High is, where Tammy lives. And it's an Afrikaans word that means brackish water or water that has high salt content. And then as a result, it does have what? Bad taste. So it is a symbol of poverty and suffering. So the people who stays in Brakwater are mainly poor and they are also suffering. That's the symbol. The next symbol is Kamdebu. Kamdebu is derived from a Khoi word meaning green hollow. Something greenish. You see the lush place green. And what does it do? It symbolizes a space in the environment which is beautiful and green. It gives a nurturing and it gives hope. And that's where our friend Isabel hails from. 2 other symbols of importance here. The school bell. What does the school bell symbolizes? It symbolizes authority and order. Authority and order. Who do we think of? Mr. M. Next we have the dictionary. It's a symbol of education, the power of language, ideas, and communication. Remember earlier where I read? Mr. M read from his dictionary what debate is. Let's proceed. Debate also has important significance in My Children, My Africa. The debate symbolizes what? Discussion and negotiation, the orderly way of doing things, where we sit down together and say, look, I am not happy about 3 and 4. No, the other person, the opponent will say, I beg to disagree with you. I think we should do it that way. So debate is orderly. We give each person an opportunity to raise their views. It is different from what we have read earlier. I never said anything of that kind. Yes, you did. You said that women were more. I call you to order. And then there's a bit of confusion. I think even the audience at that time was screaming, isn't it? There was such a loud voice in the hall. Loud noise in the hall. And then we have the stones there. What do they symbolize? The stones are a symbol for violent protest and destruction. If we cannot get our way, if the government is not listening to us, we do not have agency. What do? We pick up the stones and we throw them as a sign of protest. And what else do? We destroy, we burn, like they were intending, the activists to burn the school. And Mr. M says, we can't do that. Let us talk about this. What did Arthur Fugate say? The words can go into the armored vehicle, and the words can go into the heads of the people in those armored cars. So that's what he meant. Debate. So those are very important symbols. Let's go back to the extract, or to where we have read. It is a classroom of the Zolile High. Mr. M is at a table with Tammy and Isabel on either side of him. A lively inter-school debate is in progress. Everybody is speaking at the same time, and Mr. M is forced to call them to order. I call you both to order. So when you read, after you have read for the first time, you have read to get the summary of the extract or the page where you were reading. Now you have to go into what we call analysis. Setting there. What is setting? Where the story takes place. Where is it taking place? In a classroom of Zolile High. And when did this take place? Or what has happened at the time? There was a heated debate. So remember, when you deal with setting, you need to have your when and where. Right, learners? Remember, when and where. That's for setting. Each time you read, remember to ask yourself these questions or these ideas. Where is our Mr. M? I call you both to order. What is that? It's tone. We look at the words that Mr. M has said. We visualize. We try and hear what he tried to say. He said, I call you to order. Probably he even hit the table to tell them to keep quiet. And what he did was he resorted even to the ringing of the bell. What tone is Mr. M using here? The tone is very firm, strict, no nonsense kind of tone, calling the learners to order. Why is he using that? He wants everybody to be quiet and to have order and continue with the debate. What I said was that women were more emotional than men. So we also have the 3 dots there. What do we call these 3 dots? Can you see how they are placed? We call these ellipses. There are words that were supposed to be said, but there was a stop and a cut. Why, or what is the significance of the ellipses here? Is that Tammy cut or interrupted Isabel when she was busy talking. So there's the use of the ellipses there. Remember that? It shows the speed and the heated argument. That she wanted to continue and say, women were more intuitive, but Tammy jutted in, interrupted and said, we're more emotional than men. Mrs. Tyson and Mr. Mbikwana. So Mr. M had to call them both to order. And then the two learners did not want to listen. Isabel continued, you are twisting my words and misquoting me. Intuitive and emotional. Intuitive means you know things. You have that sense of knowing things as a woman. When you are emotional, you just happen, today you are blue, tomorrow you are green, and you sad, you happy. But when you are intuitive, you use insight, you look and study a situation. So Isabel says, you are twisting my words and you are misquoting me. You don't say things as I said. And Tammy says, I am not. I'm simply asking you. In the interim, what happens? Mr. M calls both to order. He grabs the school bell and rings it violently. He did not just ring it. He rang it so hard that it was immediately silent. Can you see the words written in red? That is what we call stage direction. Another example of stage direction there, opens and reads from a legal black dictionary that is at hand on the table. So the playwright or the author indicates to us readers what Mr. M is doing. It's an action that is taking place on stage. Because Mr. M cannot say, I am ringing the bell, or I am opening the book. So those words are put together, and normally they are written in italics. My mistake here, I did not put them in italics. They are written in italics, and we say they are stage direction. When we read these words, remember when we dealt of themes, how we recognize themes. We look at the words. The pertinent words here are the orderly and regulated discussion. Again, Mr. M at the top there, he says, come to order. So that's our theme. What is our theme? A theme of order versus disorder. Okay? So if you are asked in an exam, or if your teacher asks you to comment or to identify a particular theme here, after you have read this extract, you will come to this conclusion that the theme here is order versus disorder. Who's orderly? Mr. M demands that there should be order. And then what does he do? He calls them to order using words. What else does he do to maintain order? He uses the bell and rings it to call the learners to order. Lastly, what does he do? He opens his dictionary. He reads to them what the definition of a debate is. So he is a good teacher. He's trying to maintain order. And disorder. What is disorder? Where do you find disorder here? Tammy and Isabel are shouting at each other. 2, they are not giving each other space or time to speak. Tammy interrupts Isabel. Isabel continues to speak even though she was told to keep quiet. So can you see this order between the two learners? And probably the audience also is doing the same thing. Doing what? Screaming, urging Tammy to go on, or agreeing with Isabel. Probably the girls in this room are saying yes for Isabel, and the boys are saying, go on, Tammy, go on. So that's that. An examiner can ask you and say, using the following words, Mr. M, come to order. What would you tell Mr. M to do or to say, saying these words? Then you would say, I would tell Mr. M to stamp his feet, to raise his hand. We want to see action, isn't it? You will be the director at that stage. Right. It continues. Enthusiasm for your cause is most commendable, but without personal discipline, it is as useless as having a donkey and a good cart, but no harness. Something is at stake here. He says he's very impressed. The two learners are enthusiastic. They want to debate. And he commends them. He praises them for that. He applauds them for doing that. But on the contrary, he says, however, there should be personal discipline. They should exercise some maturity and discipline. And he compares their enthusiasm to what? To a good donkey. But if you have a good donkey, but you don't harness it, what is going to do? It's going to run amok, isn't it? You put in the donkey on a cart and you don't have a harness. A whip where you, and the harness, can you see what I'm doing? To direct it left and to direct it right. What is it going to do? The donkey is going to run away with the cart and will end up in a ditch. So this is a figure of speech. We identify a figure of speech here. And what is that figure of speech? It's a simile. Enthusiasm for the cause is being compared to a donkey and a good cart that is without a harness. So that's a lack of discipline. So as you read, learners, you're reading for enjoyment. You read for understanding, for knowledge. And again, learn to stop a bit and identify things that we have told you about. I also know that your teachers are doing the same. They are teaching you about the figures of speech, what the title is all about, and all that. We are now running out of time and therefore closing the open section of our debate. No more interruptions from the floor. Please, we'll bring our proceedings to a close with a brief, I repeat, 3 minutes at the most. So we have instructions again. The other thing. Starting with the proposals of the motion, Mr. Tamim Bikwan of the Zolile High School, will you please make your concluding statement? And then Tammy stands up. Wild round of applause from the audience. That's the reaction that he gets from the audience. They applaud him. Yay, Tommy, go, go, boy. And what is his state of mind at that stage? He is secure and he is at ease. He's feeling very confident. We talk of state of mind. He is secure and he is at ease. Remember what makes him feel this secure? Because he's speaking to his own schoolmates. That's a plus for him, isn't it? And he continues to make outrageous statements, but he enjoys the limelight. He enjoys it. And that makes him feel big. The attitude, then we need to talk about the attitude, his attitude. He's flippant, isn't it? He is carefree. I'm not sure at this stage what our Isabel is going through. Her state of mind. Okay, let's continue. Tommy stands and the audience applaud him wildly. So I'm going to read from the book. Tommy's closing statement. I don't stand here now and speak to you as a friend and schoolmate. That would lessen the seriousness of my final words to you. No. Close your eyes. Forget that you know my face and voice. Forget that you know anything about Tammy Mbikwana. Think of me, rather, as an oracle of my words as those of the great ancestors of our traditional African culture, which we turn our back on and desert to a great peril. The opposition has spoken about sexual exploitation and the need for women's liberation. Brothers and sisters, these are foreign ideas. Do not listen to them. They come from a culture, the so-called Western civilization, that has meant only misery to Africa and its people. It is the same culture that shipped away thousands of our ancestors as slaves. The same culture that has exploited Africa with the greed of a vulture during the period of colonization, and the same culture which continues to exploit us in the 20th century under the disguise of concern for our future. The opposition has not been able to refute my claim that women cannot do the same jobs as men because they are not equals of us physically, and that women's role in the family in society is totally different to that of the men's. These facts taken together reinforce what our fathers and grandfathers and our great-grandfathers knew, namely that happiness and prosperity for the tribe and the nation is achieved when education of the little ladies take these facts into consideration. Would it be right for a woman to go to war while a man sits at the sewing machine? I don't have milk in my breast to feed the baby while my wife is out digging up roads for the divisional council. Brothers and sisters, it is obvious that you feel the same as I do about this most serious matter, I hope that at the end of this debate, your vote will reflect your agreement with me. Everybody claps and whistles and they jump around. That's the conclusion that Tammy gave. The audience applaud him wildly. He is clearly very confident and comfortable speaking in front of the others, and his closing statement is also very emotional. Not only emotional, but well reasoned. He argues that African culture is in great peril, is in the great danger if, one, people can allow Western colonial influence. He believes that women and men cannot go on the same footing. There are specifically different roles between men and women. He makes the audience laugh by saying that he does not have milk in his breasts to feed children while his wife digs roads. And at the end, he tells the audience to do what? To vote for him. Do you agree with Tammy's standpoint? Particularly when he says, the happiness and prosperity for the tribe and the nation is achieved when education of the little ladies. He calls them little ladies. What do you think if a young man call girls in the audience the little ladies? That's demeaning, isn't it? It tells us about Tammy's character and his attitude. Character. He's flippant. He is too confident. He does not respect the rights of women. He thinks women are only little ladies and their place is in the kitchen. Probably the people that applauded him that much were who? The boys in the group. And he continues to say it is an African culture. If we do not put girls in the kitchen, we shall be looking down at our culture. So it is culture that women are doing particular work, and it is culture that girls' place is in the kitchen. And then he thinks Western colonial influence is a bad thing. Probably he wouldn't dare to open a car door for the wife. That would look very small to him. It will remove his dignity as a man. He continues to argue that the role of women is in the kitchen. But when we look at the bigger picture in the country, South Africa, who are the best chefs? Men. Who are the best tailors? Men. And we have women rising up and doing all sorts of work and can compete on the same footing with men. Same footing. It does not mean that if women are physically not the same as men, then we can relegate them to people of weaker vessels. No, that is not the case. So let's continue. Mr. M then invites Isabel. He says, "Thank you, Mr. Mbikwana." Tammy says. And now finally, a last statement from the captain of the visiting team, Miss Isabel Dyson of Kamdebu Girls High. And there's a polite applause. Can you differentiate the applauses? At first, when Tammy stood up, there was a wild applause. So if we can ask you about the differences, wild applause, and this time it's a polite applause. Isabel states, she takes on the audience with direct, unflinching eye contact. He does not look left and right. He looks very confident. She appears very confident. She is determined not to be intimidated. And she begins. You have had to listen to a lot of talk this afternoon about traditional values, traditional society, your great ancestors, your glorious past. In spite of what has been implied, I want to start off by telling you that I have as much respect and admiration for your history and tradition as anybody else. I believe most strongly that there are values and principles in traditional African society which could be studied with great profit by the Western civilization, so scornfully rejected by the previous speaker. But at the same time, I know and you know that Africa no longer lives in the past. For better or for worse, it is part now of the 20th century, and all the nations on this continent are struggling very hard to come to terms with that reality. Arguments about sacred traditional values, the traditional way of life, etc., are used by those who would like to hold Black Africa's progress and keep it locked in the past. Maybe there was a time in the past when a woman's life consisted of bearing children and hoeing the fields with men while men sharpened their spears and sat around waiting for another war to start. But it is a silly argument that relies on that old image of primitive Africa for its strength. It is an argument that insults your intelligence. Times have changed. Sheer brute strength is not determining factor anymore. You do not need the muscles of a prize fighter when you sit down to operate the computers that control today's world. The American space program now has women astronauts on board the space shuttle doing the same jobs as men. As for the difference in the emotional and intellectual qualities of men and women, remember that is a question of difference and not inferiority. And that with those differences go strength with compensate for the weakness in the opposite sex. And lastly, a word of warning: the argument against equality for women in education or any other field based on alleged differences between the two sexes is an argument that can very easily be used against any other different group. It is an argument based on prejudice, not fact. I ask you not to give it your support. Thank you. She sits and everybody does what? Politely applause. What happened here? Mr. M calls on Isabel, who is from Kamdebu High School. She stands with determination and makes her closing statement for the point of view that women should be allowed to hold the same jobs as men. I hope you agree with that. She furthermore argues that Africa is held back by clinging to traditional and primitive values. She also warns that arguments based on the difference between the sexes can easily be expanded to other groups of people hold prejudice against. The crowd applauds her politely. So when you look at what Isabel argued for, one, she believes that what we had in the past as Africans or as Africa can work closely together. There is some form of coexistence. We can take what happened in the past and put it easily in the present. People can do what? Coexist. Because we are now in the 20th century, we are not going to be stuck in the past. Our history determines our future, isn't it? We can make inroads, and she quotes the Americans in the space realm where men and women are doing the same jobs. I've given an example earlier where we have great chefs as men and we have the best tailors as men. And I hope you have come across women who work as plumbers or who can build houses or who work in the roads. In your classes back at school, when you do your maths, you're competing on the same footing. We don't have maths for girls and maths for boys. Those are the arguments that Isabel puts forward. And she says, we shouldn't live in the past and draw ourselves to the past, but we can go forward using the initiatives of the olden people and modifying them to bring us the good in the now. Lastly, I'm going to read what the moderator, that is Mr. M, says about the debate. Thank you, Ms. Dyson. We come now to the vote, but before we do that, a word of caution. We have had a wonderful experience this afternoon. Don't let it end on a frivolous and irresponsible note. Serious issues have been debated. Vote accordingly. To borrow a phrase from Mr. Mbikwana, forget the faces, remember the words. If you believe that we have the right to vote out there in the big world, then show it here in the classroom, that you know how to use it. Very critical and profound, isn't it? If you know and you have the right to vote in the big world, you can use that very right to vote here in the class. Vote responsibly. Well, take out a count of heads, and for the benefit of any over-enthusiastic supporters, only one hand per person, please. Let me read the proposal once again. That in view of the essential and physical and psychological differences between men and women, there should be correspondingly different educational syllabus for the two sexes. All those in favor, raise a hand. What happens? Mr. M counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And that's for Tammy. All those in favor for Isabel. And he counts. 1, 2, 13, 15, 19, 20, 22, 23, 24. 17 people vote for Tammy and 24 vote for Isabel, meaning she has won the debate. Before we break, just a reminder about the special choir practice this afternoon. Members of the choir must please join Mr. Magda in number 2 classroom after school. To Isabel and Tammy, allow me to congratulate you, Miss Dyson, on a most well-deserved victory. What do you say, Mr. Mbikwan? Tammy says to Isabel, your concluding statement was a knockout. At the end, Isabel and Tammy stay behind. They become good friends. Tammy tells Isabel of his upbringing, and Isabel does the same. Discussion questions, things that I want you to take away from this afternoon is, first, how the historical background of Athol Fugard of South Africa has a bearing on this play My Children, My Africa? The title, how important the title is. Of all the things that we have discussed this afternoon, I would like you to take into cognizance figures of speech. You should be able to identify the figures of speech as you read and how they are used. You go back to the extract, write them down, all the figures of speech that you can get. If you are not sure, ask your teacher. Check the different tone that we saw or read about today. Tammy's tone, Mr. M's tone, and Isabel's tone. Character portrayal. There are similarities that we could find, similarities between Tammy and Isabel. What are those? They are all committed. They are all eager and very intelligent debating group, debaters. Themes. Various themes that you can identify. One, assert, order, and disorder. Order versus disorder. Two, what about patriarchy? Having read what Tammy said, you can easily pass him as somebody who's very patriarchal, isn't it? You can look at the following open-ended questions. Please check these, discuss with your friends, write an essay on those, a 4-line essay or paragraph. Let's look at the first one. Sexual exploitation and the need for women's liberation are critical issues to be still discussed in 2022. These are critical issues that we have to discuss. That is sexual exploitation and the need for women's liberation. Okay. 2, Mr. M treats Isabel and Tammy the same. Is that true? I want you to discuss your view on that. Discuss. Is debate relevant in 2022? Can we still sit down and debate? Is there value in debating? Discuss. Is Tammy a rebellious boy? Also, I would like you to discuss that. You can write that and respond to that and engage with your friends at school or give to your teacher to mark for you. Very important. Is Tammy rebellious? Is debate relevant? Is Mr. M biased towards Isabel, and why? Do we still have sexual exploitation in 2022? Or is there a need for women's liberation? Learners, we have come to the end of our lesson. And I would like you to go back to school, finish reading Act 1, Scene 1. For every page that you read, check the critical issues that we have dealt with this afternoon. And I would also want to urge you to continue with the book. But in our next week lesson on Monday, we meet again, same time, same place. I would like you to go read A Chip of Class Ruby. That is if you are doing short stories. A Chip of Class Ruby. It is found in your collection of short stories. Please read the story. Bring along your book and the text so that when we read together next week and analyze the story, you should have a copy with you. Also importantly, you must also bring your pen and paper for you to take notes. If you have questions, put them on our WhatsApp interactive number. Number is 064 748 8913. Or you could also ask your teacher. Thank you for watching this lesson. Please remember to do the following. Sanitize. COVID is still with us. Wear your mask. Maintain social distancing. Keep safe. And see you next time. Goodbye.